The pre-wedding celebration for Zariah Mitchell and her fiancé Malik Henderson was in full swing. The rich aromas of soul food drifted through the night air, and the soft glow from hanging lanterns gave the backyard a warm, romantic feel. Loretta Mitchell, Zariah's mother, had poured her heart into every detail. Her daughter's wedding was a moment of deep pride, and she'd spared no effort to make it unforgettable. Everything shimmered with elegance, from the perfectly coordinated decor to the loving atmosphere that wrapped around the guests like a gentle hug. Dressed in a flowing blush gown, Zariah radiated joy. Her warm, almond-shaped eyes, so much like her mother's, sparkled with excitement and nervous anticipation. Surrounded by her closest girlfriends, Zariah chatted about last-minute wedding details, her voice laced with that sweet flutter of bridal nerves. Malik, tall, charming, and always smiling, stood close, never let her drift too far. Every time their eyes met, the affection between them was so evident it made the room pause. Their connection was magnetic, impossible to miss. Among the guests was Trey Harmon, Zariah's childhood best friend. He'd always played a quiet role in her life. Never front and center, but never too far either. Trey was one of those rare constants, steady, loyal, and always within reach. His calm presence didn't stand out in the crowd. With a subtle smile and easy small talk, he blended in effortlessly, content to observe from the edges. Out in the candlelit garden, encircled by fragrant blooms and flickering flames, Zariah and Malik looked like the embodiment of young love. Their family and friends stood around them, soaking in the beauty of the moment and the promise of the days ahead. Loretta, standing nearby, watched her daughter with glowing pride. "You are absolutely glowing," said one of Zariah's bridesmaids, Kendall, pulling her into a warm hug. "Thank you, Kendall," Zariah replied, her smile soft and full. "Everything feels so magical. It's like I'm dreaming." Malik appeared behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, planting a kiss on the top of her head. "This isn't a dream," he whispered close to her ear. "This is real. This is us." Their guests laughed and sipped champagne as Loretta stepped forward with her glass raised. Dressed in a timelessly elegant gown, she carried herself with poise, the clear hostess of the night. "My sweet girl," she began, her voice thick with love, eyes locked on Zariah. "From the moment you came into my life, you've been a light. And now, seeing you find someone who makes you shine even brighter, my heart is full. Malik, thank you for loving her. May your life together be filled with peace, laughter, and endless love. Tonight is only the beginning." The crowd raised their glasses as the sound of clinking crystal filled the air. Laughter followed. Warmth settled over everyone. Zariah embraced her mother tightly, whispering a thank you filled with emotion. Malik approached Loretta and thanked her for everything, for the support, the help, and the love. Loretta smiled, humbled but glowing. Yet Trey, who stood just close enough to catch a glimpse of her eyes, noticed something, a flicker in her expression when she looked at Malik, a fleeting, unreadable look. He dismissed it quickly, chalking it up to the whirlwind of emotions that came with big events. More toasts followed, and the air buzzed with celebration. Music began playing from the garden speakers, and the dance floor filled up. Loretta glided among the guests with grace, her laughter lighting up every conversation. Zariah and Malik danced, completely engrossed in one another. They moved in sync, fluid and effortless, like two souls in tune with each other. At one point, Zariah stepped away to greet a relative, and Loretta made her way to Malik. They exchanged a few quiet words. Her hand rested lightly on his shoulder, barely a touch. Harmless, perhaps, but to someone like Trey, who observed life from the sidelines, it registered as something more, something gently intimate, just beneath the surface. Trey noticed, but said nothing. He'd spent most of the evening chatting half-heartedly with guests, always aware of Zariah, but keeping to the background. His place wasn't in the spotlight, and tonight felt no different. When Zariah returned to Malik's side, their fingers naturally intertwined again, and they continued their slow dance beneath the lights. Loretta stood off to the side, watching the couple with an expression caught somewhere between joy and sorrow. The kind of look only a mother who had weathered great loss, but refused to show it, might wear, As the evening wound down, Loretta offered one final toast. Her voice was strong, her words heartfelt. She praised their love, spoke of faith and family, and declared her hope for a future full of happiness for the young couple. Slowly, guests began to leave with full hearts and lingering smiles. The Mitchell home quieted. Only a few remained, Zariah's inner circle, including Trey, who said his goodbyes with the same quiet composure he'd carried all evening. He hugged Zariah and Malik, nodded respectfully to Loretta, and slipped into the night like a shadow. Later, Loretta stood at the window, her eyes searching the garden where laughter had once echoed just hours before. Her face was thoughtful, distant, like someone guarding a secret, one she hadn't yet spoken aloud. As the wedding day crept closer, Zariah was swept up in final preparations, picking centerpieces, tweaking the menu, selecting her veil. She moved with the rhythm of a woman planning the most important day of her life. But an uneasiness had started to build. Malik, once fully present, engaged in every decision, began to pull away. More and more, he lingered at her mother's house. Sometimes it was to discuss the music, other times the rings. Or just, he claimed, to grab a cup of coffee. At first, Zariah thought nothing of it. But then, one evening as she sat at the table working on the guest list, Malik walked in wearing a relaxed, satisfied smile. "You at my mom's again?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "Yeah," he said, tossing his jacket on a chair. "We were talking about music and jewelry. She said she's got a surprise for you." Zariah forced a smile, but felt a twinge inside. Loretta had always been considerate, but never pushy, not one to take control. Now it seemed like she was inserting herself in every little thing. Zariah dismissed the feeling. She chalked it up to nerves. But the doubt didn't leave. Days passed. Malik left again, said he had a meeting with a florist Loretta recommended. That night, Zariah decided to stop by her mother's house unannounced. It was only a few blocks away. As she approached, she could have sworn she saw a shadow move across the window, a silhouette that looked a lot like Malik's. She shook the thought off. When she stepped inside, he was gone. Loretta greeted her warmly, offered her tea. But when Zariah mentioned Malik, she noticed her mother stiffen. "He told me he'd be working today," Zariah said lightly. "Yes," Loretta replied quickly, her voice just a bit too smooth. "He called earlier. We chatted about a few things. Nothing much." The answer came too fast, too practiced. Something didn't sit right. Zariah tried to brush it away. But the seed had been planted, and it grew with every passing hour. Meanwhile, Trey began visiting more often, offering to help with errands and decisions. He was still the same dependable friend, always ready to listen. They sat in cafes discussing flowers and colors, sharing quiet moments that felt a little too comforting. "You okay? You look worn out," he asked gently one afternoon, as they sat on the patio of a small diner in Cedar Rapids. Zariah stared into her cup, her mind elsewhere. "Yeah, just tired, I guess," she said, barely audible. "The wedding feels so close, but something about it just feels off." Trey nodded slowly, masking concern in his eyes. "It's normal to feel overwhelmed," he said. "But if anything feels wrong, you know you can talk to me." Zariah smiled softly, giving his hand a grateful squeeze. "Thank you, Trey," she murmured. "You've always been there for me." But there was hesitation in her eyes. Trey could tell she was trying to reassure herself that everything was okay, but deep down, he wasn't convinced. He had noticed the way Malik and Loretta had begun to interact lately. How often they shared quiet conversations, how their eyes lingered on each other a moment too long. It was the kind of closeness that went unnoticed by most, but not by him. One afternoon, Trey stopped by Zariah's house to drop off a photo album she'd asked him to help compile for the wedding. Malik wasn't home, and the two of them spent hours sorting pictures, laughing softly and sipping tea as they worked. Trey tried his best to keep Zariah relaxed and smiling, though something unspoken gnawed at him from within. As the evening wound down, Trey stepped outside and glanced across the street toward Loretta's house. A soft glow spilled from her window. Then he saw a figure move past the curtain. A man. Trey recognized Malik's silhouette instantly. His stomach tightened. He stood frozen, staring at the window, heart pounding. He had always had his doubts, always sensed there was something deeper between Malik and Loretta than just planning a wedding. But now the doubt was starting to crystallize into something real. Days later, Zariah tried once again to silence her worries. She threw herself into dress fittings, cake tastings, and color swatches. Still, every time Malik was near her mother, her thoughts spiraled. Their conversations became strangely personal. Their touches, small, frequent, and unnecessary. That night, lying beside Malik, she finally spoke. "You've been spending a lot of time with my mom lately," she said, eyes fixed on the ceiling. Malik turned toward her with a faint smile. "She just wants to help. Zariah, you know how much she loves you." Zariah nodded, but the uneasiness persisted. He kissed her cheek and turned away, lost in his own thoughts. Something had shifted between them, and she could no longer pretend not to feel it. At first, she told herself not to overreact. But then, once again, Malik disappeared for hours, claiming to be at Loretta's house, helping finalize a music list. Meanwhile, Trey quietly watched everything unfold. He didn't bring up his suspicions to Zariah, but his distrust of Malik burned hotter each day. The more he saw Zariah on edge, the more protective he became. Whether she realized it or not, Trey had made it his mission to look out for her. One evening, Trey visited under the guise of helping with last-minute decorations. As they worked, they heard voices echo through Quiet House. Malik and Loretta. The words were muffled, but something in their tone made Trey pause. He watched from a distance as Malik and Loretta exchanged a glance. It wasn't casual, it carried weight, a familiarity that suggested history, intimacy. "I'll be right back," Malik said abruptly before stepping out of the room. Loretta lingered in the hallway, half shrouded in shadow. It was subtle, but Trey noticed. She seemed to be avoiding being seen. Zariah didn't catch it. But Trey felt that gnawing in his gut again, the kind that only grows stronger with every unanswered question. Still, he said nothing. He didn't want to be the one to rip Zariah's happiness away. But deep down he knew the truth was sitting just beneath the surface, waiting to tear everything apart. That night was supposed to be like any other. Quiet, routine. But for Zariah, it was anything but. She sat on the couch flipping through her wedding album, but her thoughts refused to settle. Her mind drifted again to Malik and her mother. The closeness, the strange energy, the unexplained visits. She tried once more to convince herself she was imagining things. That was just wedding stress. But even that lie was losing strength. When Malik told her he was heading to Loretta's again to finalize the guest list, something snapped inside her. She grabbed her coat, waited a few minutes, then slipped out the door and followed. Loretta's house wasn't far. Zariah kept to the sidewalk shadows, her breath coming shallow as she approached the window. Through the parted curtains, she saw them, Malik and Loretta, standing too close in the warm light of the living room. Their voices were hushed. She couldn't make out the words, but their body language screamed everything. Loretta reached up, slowly brushing her hand across Malik's cheek. He didn't flinch, didn't step back. Instead, he leaned closer. Their lips met. Zariah's heart collapsed inside her chest. She stood frozen, unable to move, unable to look away. Her fiancé, her mother, the two people she loved and trusted most, locked in betrayal. The pain was immediate, sharp, physical. Her knees weakened, her breath caught in her throat. Tears filled her eyes, blurring the image before her, but not enough to forget what she had seen. She turned and ran. The cold Iowa wind whipped across her face as her sobs broke free. She couldn't see the road or feel her feet beneath her. Her mind screamed questions that had no answers. Why? Why her mother? How could they do this to me? She stumbled into a small neighborhood park and collapsed onto a bench, allowing herself to cry until there was nothing left inside but hollow disbelief. Across the street, Trey stood in silence. He hadn't planned to be there. He was on his way to drop off a pair of earrings Loretta had asked him to pick up for the wedding, but something had drawn him in. He stopped outside her house and looked toward the lit window. That's when he saw it. Two shadows, one of them unmistakably Malik. The other, Loretta. He froze. And then, the kiss. His blood turned to fire. He'd always believed Malik wasn't good enough for Zariah. But now he knew Malik wasn't just unworthy. He was a fraud, a traitor. Trey's fists clenched as he stood in the darkness, watching the moment unfold through the glass. Rage built inside him like a wave. Every fiber of his being wanted to charge into that house and confront them both. But he held back, just barely. Instead, he stood still, letting the fury boil just beneath the surface. All he could think about was Zariah, her smile, her tears, her trust, and how shattered it would all be now. The next morning, Iowa woke to the wail of sirens. A crowd had gathered near Loretta's home, their whispers sharp and urgent. Yellow tape cordoned off the backyard. On the ground lay a body, Malik Henderson, cold, lifeless, face turned toward the wooded path behind the house. Zariah was jolted from sleep by a ringing phone. On the other end, a somber voice. "Miss Mitchell," the officer said, "I'm sorry to inform you. We found Malik Henderson. He's been murdered." The words crashed into her like a tidal wave. The man she'd once imagined a future with, the same man who betrayed her just hours earlier, was now gone forever. Her hands shook as the phone slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. Her world had crumbled in a single night. First to betrayal and now to bloodshed. She drove to the crime scene on autopilot, her body numb, her thoughts scattered. Two of the closest people in her life were gone, one lost to deception, the other to death. Red and blue lights pulsed across the quiet neighborhood as police cars lined the street. Curious neighbors whispered to one another in hushed tones, speculating about what might have happened. As Zariah approached the yellow tape near her mother's home, a detective stepped forward to meet her. "We found him here," he said, pointing toward the lawn just outside Loretta's house. "It looks like he was trying to get away." Zariah remained quiet. She couldn't bring herself to say what she'd witnessed the night before. If she confessed, she could destroy her mother's life. But what if her mother had something to do with this? Her mind spun with disbelief and growing suspicion. Could Loretta, the woman who raised her with love and warmth, truly be involved in Malik's death? Moments later, Loretta was led out of the house for questioning. Her face was pale and shaken, her composure slipping beneath the weight of the moment. The officers questioned her relentlessly, but she stayed firm. "Malik and I were just going over wedding details," she repeated. "I went to bed early. I didn't see him again after he left." Still, the facts didn't favor her story. Malik's body had been found in her backyard, footprints in the damp grass, blood droplets along the walkway. All evidence pointed back to her home. Zariah watched it unfold, heartbroken and overwhelmed. First, her fiancé. Now, her mother. Everything she thought she understood about her life was unraveling in real time. Was this some desperate act of jealousy by Loretta? Or was someone else behind it? Meanwhile, Trey remained in the background, quiet and composed on the outside, but torn apart internally. He watched as Zariah stood helpless in the chaos, and all he wanted was to protect her from the weight of it all. That morning was gray and fog-drenched. Police had cordoned off Loretta's house. Neighbors clustered in small groups nearby, sharing rumors. Reporters had already begun arriving, cameras snapping, eager to capture the next big headline. The death of Malik Henderson had shaken the entire community. Just days earlier, he had seemed full of joy and anticipation. Detective Lila Walker, a respected investigator known for her methodical brilliance, had taken the lead on the case. An initial assessment of the crime scene confirmed Malik had died from blunt force trauma to the head. No signs of a struggle. The killer had likely caught him off guard. Scattered footprints led toward Loretta's back door, and with that, the investigation narrowed in. Jennifer Mitchell, now the primary person of interest, was brought in for deeper questioning. She looked exhausted, hollow-eyed, but she stayed consistent. "I don't know anything. I was asleep when he left," she murmured, barely meeting the detective's eyes. Her words lacked conviction, and the unease in her demeanor only deepened suspicions. The forensic team's sweep of the house uncovered signs that more had occurred than a simple conversation about wedding plans. But Detective Walker didn't rush to judgment. Something about the scene didn't sit right with her. Yes, Loretta was hiding something. But was it murder? A more detailed search yielded new clues. In the backyard, one of the officers found a second set of footprints near where the body had fallen. These belonged to someone with shoes smaller than Malik's, yet larger than Loretta's. And oddly, the prints stopped at a side gate that led into the woods. Could someone else have been there that night? Someone who escaped through the trees? Zariah remained in shock. Her world had collapsed overnight. She had lost not just her fiancé, but her trust in her mother, the person who once meant everything to her. Could Loretta really have murdered Malik to bury their secret? Could the betrayal go that far? As the investigation wore on, detectives reviewed the alibis of everyone who had attended the pre-wedding celebration. Suspicion hovered around Loretta like a storm cloud, but the more they dug, the shakier the case against her became. Detective Walker pored over the evidence again and again, but something kept pulling at her intuition. Despite the circumstantial links, Loretta didn't feel like the killer. Neighbors reported no yelling or strange noises at night. Surveillance cameras on nearby homes captured nothing out of the ordinary. Still, Walker couldn't shake the feeling that the person responsible was hiding in plain sight. That's when she turned her attention to Trey Harmon. He had been in Zariah's life since childhood. Soft-spoken, loyal, helpful on the surface. Just a long-time friend offering support in a moment of crisis. But Walker, who missed nothing, began to see subtle red flags. She started gathering information about Trey. He held a modest job, had no criminal record, and led a relatively quiet life. But everything about him seemed too perfect. When she interviewed neighbors, a pattern emerged. Trey had been seen at Zariah's and Loretta's houses frequently, often even when Zariah wasn't home. People initially chalked it up to their long friendship, but the deeper the detectives dug, the more curious his involvement seemed. And then they found the notebook, hidden in a drawer at Trey's apartment. It contained pages of handwritten thoughts about Zariah, detailed, personal reflections that went far beyond friendly admiration. He described her daily habits, her favorite places to go, the books she read, even conversations she had with Malik. It was clear he had been observing her closely for some time. Too closely. Some passages hinted at obsession. With this discovery, detectives began to question everything they thought they knew. Could Malik's murder have been driven by jealousy? Could Trey have learned about the affair between Malik and Loretta and decided to take matters into his own hands? Walker didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the image of Trey as a harmless friend had shattered. For days, her team tracked him discreetly. His calm demeanor didn't waver, but now it seemed almost calculated. His consistent presence around Zariah no longer felt comforting. It felt intrusive. Then came the break. Footage from a local convenience store camera captured Trey walking past Loretta's house around the estimated time of Malik's death. The image wasn't definitive, but it was enough to warrant deeper investigation. With the evidence against Loretta falling apart, suspicion had begun to shift. Trey Harmon, once in the background, was now squarely in the spotlight. He knew too much. He was always too close. And the question that now consumed Detective Walker was, how and why did Trey end up at Loretta's house that night? The difficult part was that none of the suspects had revealed their true intentions. Loretta, despite her affair with Trey, appeared genuinely devastated by his death. Zariah, though filled with suspicion, couldn't bring herself to believe that her mother might be guilty of murder. But Malik, with his quiet, long-standing love for Zariah and his growing resentment toward Trey, was becoming a central figure in the case. The investigation pressed on, and with each passing day, every detail and observation brought the detectives closer to the truth. Detective Lila Walker stood by her office window, staring down at the busy streets below. Her thoughts remained tangled in the murder of Trey Hammond. Although the trail of evidence seemed to point straight to Loretta Monroe, something in Walker's gut told her the truth lay elsewhere. Her eyes landed on a photograph of Malik Jordan, Zariah's childhood friend. There was something about his unassuming demeanor, his constant presence around Zariah, that kept gnawing at her. Walker couldn't forget the notebook she recovered from Malik's apartment, filled with obsessive entries about Zariah. Those pages, paired with the surveillance footage showing Malik near Loretta's home the night of the murder, started to form a theory in her mind. She made a call to bring Malik in for questioning. When Malik stepped into the interrogation room, he appeared calm, but Walker could see in his eyes. Tension simmered just below the surface. She began with routine questions, gradually steering the conversation toward the night Trey was killed. Malik stiffened slightly when she brought up the video footage. His answers turned vague, his gaze more evasive. Walker could tell she was onto something. Realizing she wouldn't get a confession by force, she shifted tactics. She spoke gently about Zariah, about how much pain she was in, and how she needed someone she could trust. Malik's entire face changed at the mention of her name. His eyes lit up, and the detective knew she'd found the weak spot. She pressed on, mentioning that Zariah had described Malik as her most dependable friend. At that, Malik's jaw tightened, and his hands curled into fists. The word friend had struck a chord. After the session, Walker was certain Malik was hiding something. She paid Zariah a visit and carefully explained her suspicions. At first, Zariah refused to believe it. Malik had been a part of her life forever, gentle, loyal, always there. But when Walker laid out the plan, Zariah hesitated. The detective wanted her to tell Malik that she loved him, to get him to open up. Initially, Zariah rejected the idea. She didn't want to manipulate someone who'd always been kind to her. But after a long, sleepless night, she realized it might be the only way to find the truth. They met in the park where they had played as children. Zariah's heart was heavy with doubt. Could Malik really have done this? She eased into the conversation, reminiscing about their childhood memories and how much he meant to her. Then, taking a deep breath, she looked him in the eyes and said the words he'd dreamed of hearing his whole life. "I love you, Malik." The change in him was instant. His face lit up with joy. Tears welled in his eyes. He grabbed her hands and kissed them, overcome with emotion. Then, as if a dam had finally broken, the words poured out. He spoke of the years he had loved her from afar, protecting her, watching over her. He admitted how much he despised Trey, how he believed Trey was unworthy of her. And then he spoke of that fateful night. Zariah sat frozen, her breath shallow, as Malik described following Trey from Loretta's house. He told her how he had waited in the shadows with a bat, convinced he was saving her from heartbreak. When Trey walked by, Malik attacked, striking him down in what he saw as an act of love. To Malik, it had been a righteous decision. Zariah listened in horror, unable to believe what she was hearing. The man she considered her best friend had killed her fiancé and justified it as a favor. When Malik finished, he looked at her, expecting relief, gratitude, maybe even love. Instead, he saw fear, disgust. Everything shattered in that moment. The fantasy he had built, the love he believed would redeem his actions. It all crumbled. Detective Walker, who had been watching from a distance, stepped forward and placed Malik under arrest. He didn't resist. His eyes remained fixed on Zariah, still confused by the outcome of his twisted plan. Zariah stood frozen in the park, her world falling apart yet again. First her fiancé, then her mother's betrayal, and now the best friend she had trusted with her heart. Tears rolled down her cheeks as the weight of the tragedy settled in. Detective Walker returned to Zariah and offered quiet support. Though Zariah was grateful, she needed space. Everything hurt too much. Back at the precinct, Walker finalized her reports. The case was closed, the killer identified, but the outcome left a bitter taste. Obsession, unrequited love, the kind of pain that could twist someone's mind beyond recognition. News of Malik's arrest sent shockwaves through the town. Most couldn't believe the quiet, unassuming man had committed such a brutal act. Many expressed deep sympathy for Zariah, recognizing the depth of her loss. Loretta Monroe was cleared of any criminal charges, but the damage to her reputation was permanent. Her affair with Trey had become public knowledge, and people judged her harshly. She tried to reach out to Zariah, to apologize, to explain, but her daughter wasn't ready to hear it. Zariah's world was in ruins, her trust shattered. She retreated from everyone, spending her days isolated in her bedroom, trying to process what had happened. Detective Walker, as she completed the paperwork for court, found herself thinking often about the young woman, about how one murder had destroyed 3 lives. She hoped Uriah would one day find peace. In his jail cell, Malik sat alone, awaiting trial. He still couldn't grasp the full weight of what he had done. In his mind, he was still the hero, the man who saved the woman he loved. He wrote her letters, desperate to explain. But Zariah never replied. The town began to return to normal, but the murder left a scar, a warning. Even in the quietest places, darkness can grow where no one expects it. For Zariah, the long road to healing had begun. She knew it would take time to learn to trust again, to believe and love again. But somewhere deep down, she also knew she would survive. Detective Walker closed the file on the case, but the memories stayed with her. It had reminded her of the importance of intuition, of looking beyond surface-level suspects. This case would be remembered not only for the crime, but for the tangled, fragile nature of human relationships. And for the residents of that quiet Iowa town, it would forever serve as a somber reminder. Even the kindest faces can hide the darkest intentions. If this story moved you, there's so much more to uncover. The secrets, the betrayal, the heartache that hides behind the faces we trust most. Subscribe now to never miss the drama, the emotion, and the untold truths. Join the journey. Hit that button and be part of the next stories. This is Ruthless Realities. Until next time.